Inshallah ta'ala. Allahu A'udhu billahi min shaitan rajim. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil mursaleen Sayyidina wa Nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. أما بعد فقال الله تبارك وتعالى في كتاب الكريم بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الطلاق مرتان فإمساك بمعروف أو تسريح بإحسان صدق الله العظيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي آمين يا رب العالمين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to all of the brothers and sisters joining us on our YouTube channel, on our Zoom meeting group. I hope you're okay. The best of health, the best of Iman. We pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows us to benefit from what is to be recited, what is to be read from the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Today we continue with the fiqh topic, and the reason I brought it straight away is that we will inshallah have a prolonged session on this topic of talaq, and we continue from the subject of nikah, which we've covered for the last 4, 5, 6 weeks, alhamdulillah. We've had a summary of the main concepts regarding the nikah, and last week we concluded on the part regarding how the wali plays an important role in the nikah, and also how compatibility is also something which we look at in times of marriage. When we concluded the chapter on nikah, there was a chapter in between which talks about rida', and that is the rida' in Islam, that how we look at the fosterage and the infants when it comes to issues of talaq and also issues of marriage, and this was covered in the chapter in between. But we will go straight into another important topic, and that is the topic of talaq. And the two main subjects of the fiqh will be nikah and talaq, because I feel that there's still a lot of misinformation. There is still a lot of confusion regarding what pertains a talaq, what pertains a khula, what pertains a fasq, and how does a couple, come to the stage where they take upon themselves or they get somebody involved in talaq. And it is something which, when we read from the books of fiqh and from the tafsir of the ayahs of talaq, and we read the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, giving us examples, great examples, which we need to try to apply in our lives, and we need to try to implement them as Muslims. Unfortunately, when we move away from the practices that have been legislated upon us from the Quran and the Sunnah, that's when we fall into problems, and we take ourselves away from the path, the guidance, into misguidance. And that is not to blame the Sharia, not to blame anything else, but to blame ourselves, because we have taken other than the Quran as a guide, and other than the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the same could be said about not just the nikah, but as the worship acts that we cover in the beginning of the books. For instance, when we start with the book of purity, tahara, salat, zakat, siyam, and hajj, each one has particulars, and they must be looked at from the angle of the shari'i, and also what the objectives are from these ahkam, and finally, how do we apply them in our lives. So everything that we read, anything that we read, it must be from the intention of applying it in our lives. And that is the final sort of the three aspects of learning, applying of the ahkams in the lives. So the chapter number 62, so we started with chapter number 60, then 61 we have skipped. So 62 will go straight on to some points regarding talaq. If there's any questions after the session, please do unmute yourself, and I will try to, inshallah, give you some time for the questions. So talaq as-sunnah, And when we read through the text, you will understand there are different types of talaq. He starts off the author Al-Mirghinani. He starts by mentioning some main headings, and I'm just going to go through some of the headings here. So, Book 8, Talaq as-Sunnah, the divorce conforming to the Sunnah. This is a chapter which has a subsection in it, which we'll cover next week, the legal capacity for pronouncing divorce. And this is a massive area of confusion which still is in the minds of Muslims around the world. The first part is the talaq as-sunnah, and then we will cover these other topics as well: pronouncing divorce, how do you pronounce the words of divorce, what if you associate talaq with time, other types of talaq, divorce by simile, tashbih, divorce prior to consummation, divorce through indirect expectation, because each one of them has a sort of ultimatum or has a repercussion. Each one of these sub sections has repercussions. And then we have very, very important tafweed, the delegation of talaq. I giving the choice, the ikhtiyar, giving the talaq into the hands of the wife. This can be done, and divorce at one's discretion. And then the final thing is obviously pertaining to oaths, and also interesting that we have this bit here, the divorce by a person who's suffering from terminal illness. Terminal illness could also, we can cover issues such as mental health, and also we'll cover later on the issue of intoxication. What happens when a person is intoxicated? Does his talaq fall? Does it go through? Is it binding upon that? We need to go through them, inshallah ta'ala. Also, what makes, we have the raj'a, how to take back a wife, or retracting a divorce, and also how do we make a divorced wife lawful? And this comes under the topic of raj'a, talaq raj'i. And there are many other types of talaq which we'll go through, vows of continence, redemption, etc. Khula of khul is also a very, very important topic of our time. Many questions relate to khula, and there's a confusion regarding, is khula the same as talaq? Is it different? What are the main differences? I will go through this inshallah in the next few weeks. Our plan is that we continue these sessions on fiqh and aqidah for the next few weeks, hopefully up till the month of Ramadan. Okay, let us begin. I will not go through the rest of the thing because this is not something we're going to cover. There are obviously zihar, kafara, expiation, impotence, idda. These are all very, very important. Right of custody to the child, the waiting period for the wife, what happens in the morning period. We'll go through these. Nafaqa, you see, again, very, very important. Understand what the Shari says regarding paying maintenance, nafaqa, to the wife. Yeah, so these are things which we'll inshallah cover. Okay. So let us begin with the first section. Talaq is the talaq of sunnah, or he says that talaq in general is of three types: hasan, proper; ahsan, which is more appropriate; and bid'i, which is innovative, not conforming to the sunnah. What is the type which is the best type of talaq? Is the ahsan. And what happens in the ahsan talaq is that the man, he will divorce his wife with a single repudiation, with a single pronunciation during her time of purity, from hayd, from menstruation, and she's pure. This is the ahsan way of giving talaq. This is how a talaq should be given. I.e., she is in a state of purity, he has had no relationship with her, and this is the time in which he gives her talaq. He then leaves her alone. He leaves her alone until she completes her waiting period, her iddah. Her iddah is obviously, as you know, 3 cycles or 3 months, whichever one you can calculate based upon her natural cycles. What is the reason for mentioning this ahsan type of talaq? Is that the companions, may Allah be pleased with them, they used to prefer not increasing the number of talaq given once. They never used to like this. They used to only say once until the passing of the waiting period. What is the hikmah, what is the merit behind this? Is that when a man divorces his wife 3 times, when a man divorces his wife 3 times, one in each period of purity, that is also a type, Hasan type. But the Ahsan type is, this has a greater merit. What's this greater merit? It is that the Ahsan type of talaq is farthest from remorse. It is the furthest from remorse, leaving a possibility of retraction. This is the hikmah behind it, my dear brothers in Islam. It gives you more chance of reconciling, of patching things up. This is what the Shari wants. The Shari does not want you to just give up on your relationship with your wives and husbands. It gives you more time, and it's less injurious for the woman to continuously say the words of talaq to the woman. It is hurtful to her feelings, and there is strong condemnation against that, as we will go through inshallah soon. So there is no dispute about the absence of disapproval for this form, i.e. to give hurt to your wife, and there's great wisdom which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. So going back to the top bit here, the Hasan type of talaq is also called talaq as-sunnah. Talaq as-sunnah. And that is that a woman is divorced, i.e. if this woman has had relationship with her husband and she's given divorce, 3 divorces in each purity time of her cycles, 1 in each. So she has 3 cycles, and in each cycle she is given talaq in her purity, not while she's in the state of menstruation. Imam Malik says no, this is bid'ah, and only a single repudiation is permitted, i.e. 1 utterance of talaq. This is what Imam Malik says. So there is the Ahnaf, they do give the allowance to give talaq in each cycle, but what we say later on, it will come, that the best way is what we have mentioned above, the ahsan. Even though Imam Malik, he says no, it shouldn't be done. So a single repudiation or a single utterance of talaq is sufficient. It is sufficient. And how do we come to this conclusion? Is the saying of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam from Ibn Umar, when he says to him that it is a sunnah to wait a period of purity, then to divorce her. And when Ibn Umar gave talaq to his wife, she was not in the state of purity, so he waited, and then he gave the talaq at that instance in 1 utterance. So why are we talking about this? Is basically the whole concept of the issue of talaq is regarding the evidence of need, i.e. when the husband or the wife, they're in need of each other, and in that time they utter these words, there is more value to it, or there is more importance given to it, i.e. when there's a desire between the husband and the wife, and at this time they come to this conclusion that that's it, we're going to separate. This has more value, it has more importance in the eyes of the Shara. Therefore, this is what we say, this is what we're going to inshallah conclude upon, is that we should make this known, that to delay the pronouncement of the talaq till the period of tuhur, period of purity, to avoid prolonging the waiting period. This is also another hikmah behind it, that it doesn't prolong the iddah. You know, we have brothers phoning us and inquiring that we've given divorce, Imam Sahab, blah, 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 all this. And when you ask them, you know, was she in purity? Majority of the time, we unfortunately, it is said no, or we don't know. So this is why we have to take care in these aspects. Before we go to the last bit, the talaq al-bid'i, which is the most common form of talaq that we are seeing in our times, it is a great tragedy, I would say, a great tragedy that is happening in front of us. But before I come to that, the importance of giving the talaq again with, see, it's difficult to explain this, but with the kindness and with the mercy. This might sound bizarre, that how can somebody give talaq in a way which is kind, or in a way which is respectful? Why is the Sharia telling us to wait for her purity, not to say anything, utter anything while she is in her period? Is because of this reason, is to give her the due respect, to give her the due rights, and not to trample over her rights. You know, we talk about human rights, we talk about women's rights, we talk about men's rights. The Sharia caters for that. The Sharia caters for that. The Sharia is not just about cutting your hands, chopping your, you know, your hands off, or you know, putting you up on the you know, to hang you. No, this is not what. This is part of the Sharia for the criminals, the crimes that are, you know, perpetrated against humanity. But the objectives of the Sharia, one of them is to protect the dignity, حفظ النفس, حفظ العقل, and to protect the continuation of a just society. This is where we focus on the aspect of talaq, nikah, and other topics which relate to this field. Two types of talaq we have mentioned. Now we come to the third one. This is really a serious issue that we need to look at. This is something that needs to be looked at, and it needs to be, I would say, it needs to be highlighted within society, because there are again repercussions. There are issues which will come out of this from this third type, which is talaq al-bid'i or bid'ah, innovation. This is again, why is it innovation? Because it goes against the sunnah. How did this happen? Is that when a husband divorces his wife with three utterances, three reputations pronounced in a single statement, or three reputation in a single period of purity. So both, yeah. It's not just saying it three in one statement, I three in one, but also three in one time period. If he does this, what happens? The divorce, it actually takes effect. But he has also sinned. There's a sin behind this, which people forget. That not only is that the talaq has actually happened, but also the person, the husband, has sinned. Imam Shafi has a slightly different opinion on this. He said that each form of divorce is mubah, it's permissible. It is legally valid. It has its effect. But the Hanaf, they say no, the three take effect straight away with the sin upon the husband. Then he goes on to explain why is this prohibited? What's the reason behind it? The reason behind it, obviously, is one of the reasons which he mentioned is due to the prolongation of the iddah, the waiting period for the woman, and not the divorce. This is why it is made, it's bid'ah, it is against the sunnah. And the Hanafi school of thought, we say that we maintain that the general rule is that in divorce it is prohibition, insofar as it leads to the termination of nikah. Which is basically what he's trying to say here, is that the whole purpose of the marriage contract is to secure your interest in this world and in the hereafter. If that is taken out, then this is the time where the divorce becomes allowed. This is what he's trying to explain. I.e., the permissibility of the divorce is to meet a need of being separated. This is a very, very important point which we sometimes forget. That the need for it, the permissibility of divorce is to meet a need of being separated. And we say that there is no such need of gathering three utterances in a single statement. Whereas the contrary to that is that we should distribute them in each month. So the need is still there. It still remains that they need to be separated. So what we do is that the application of the evidence to this need, as for the legal validity of the act, is the elimination of the marriage. I.e., we don't say that it becomes prohibition due to an external meaning, and that meaning which we have stated above. The same could be said about not just saying 3 utterance in one period, but also same applies with the pronouncing of 2 utterance in one period of time, as these are also bid'ah on the basis of what we have said above. Yeah. So just before we go to the second bit here, I'm just going to mention what the scholars, the fuqaha, what they say. They differ regarding the talaq ba'in, the single irrevocable repudiation. What do we? So there are types of talaq which occur where you cannot actually take your wife back, even though it's one talaq, and that will come later on. We'll cover those segments, inshallah. There's a difference of here. Why is it that this type of talaq is not possible for the husband to take her back? Because the essence is that it goes against the sunnah. So anything that goes against the sunnah, it has far greater consequences than the asal, which is the sunnah type of giving a talaq. Because you have not just given the talaq, but you have violated the sunnah. Because there is nothing, you don't need to add anything else to that. For separation, you don't have to go above any, you don't have to go over the limits. And this is what happens a lot of time. Most of the time, husbands, they go beyond the limit. And what happens then is they fall into a maze of confusion, going from one imam to the other imam, to one scholar to the other scholar, trying to find a way out. But the damage has already been done due to the lack of information, to the lack of knowledge, or even just the lack of patience, I would say. There's no need for you to go above what is required by the Sharia. Whenever you go above, you go into extremes, you will fall into the pits of problems, and the pits of problems which we see in our society. So don't go beyond what is required from you. So basically, if we have a case of talaq, we say to the husband, give your wife 1 talaq in her purity, then count 3 months. You don't have to give her another talaq another month. You can do, it's fine. We don't have to. Automatically, after the 3 cycles, 3 periods, 3 tuhur, you will, if you don't take her back, then you are separated. You are separated. So there's a difference between the 3 talaq in one. There's a difference between the irrevocable repudiation, i.e. the irrevocable, if you say the words in certain ways, which we will discuss inshallah ta'ala in a few weeks' time. That is the first bit, the 3 types, and what is the procedure, very, very basically. But there are also other things we need to keep in mind when it comes to talaq. That when we talk about the sunnah in the divorce, it is of 2 types. There are 2 aspects to this sunni or this sunnah type. So there's a sunnah pertaining to time. We mentioned the time has to be according to the sunnah, and also the sunnah pertaining to the numbers, i.e. the utterance. So when we say the sunnah pertaining to number applies equally to the one whose marriage stands consummated and the one whose marriage has not, i.e. those partners who've had relationship and those who've not had relationships. The sunnah regarding to the time applies only to the woman whose marriage has been consummated, and she is the one who the man, divorces in a time where she's pure and there has been no relationship. So what is again, going back to the initial point that I mentioned, the time where the desire is renewed, when the time of purity is renewed, and such a time when there has been no relationship. This is the time where the man, he with a sound mind, he has to make his mind, or he has to choose which way he goes with the marriage. On the contrary to that, if it's a time where she is in her haid, in her menstruation, it is a period of repulsion. They have, the woman and the man, they're both, going through times in their life, and the desire subsides, and once the haid finishes, then that's the time where the sharia, see, there's great wisdom behind it. There is great hikmah, my dear brothers and sisters Islam. So please take heed from this, and take some lessons, so that we can inform ourselves and those who are going through difficulties in their lives. I'm going to finish off on this final point here. So it goes on to talk about those whose marriage has not been consummated. Then he may divorce in the period of purity or in menstruation is fine. There's no problems with that. If she's of old age, or if he wants to divorce her thrice according to the sunnah, he is to divorce her with one repudiation. Again, so that the stressing the importance of this given one repudiation. Then after the month to repeat it, and then after a month. This is the case of an old woman, or due to unable to have the hayd. So again, it mentions those who have passed the age of monthly courses. So how will the calculation of the waiting period be said? So say, for instance, if I'm just going to go through this bit here. If the divorce was pronounced at the beginning of the month, so the reckoning of the months will be based on the moon, moon calendar. If it was pronounced in the middle of the month, then it will be based on the days for the distribution of the repudiations. So i.e., you will either go by, if it's in the beginning of the month, you will go by obviously the month calendar. If it's in the middle of the month, then you have to go with 29, 30 days. That's what he's trying to say to us. And just a final sub point to this is that divorce when a wife is pregnant is permitted after having a relationship, but the reason is that it does not lead to any confusion in working out the iddah, because the iddah is obviously, as you know, as soon as she given birth, her iddah is finished. The period of pregnancy is obviously a time where she's pure, but there's possibility of becoming pregnant and the causing giving birth again is not possible. So because the desires are there, it counts as if she's in purity. But if he divorces her thrice in the prescribed period of sunnah, then by separating every two repetition with a month, as we know, according to Abu Hanifa and Abu Yusuf and Zufar, he says that he's just going to say what, again, stressing again to just say it once, to say the repetition once. Because the Sharia has given us the time limit for those who are pregnant, for those who are not pregnant, etc. How many months they must wait. And so the month is the normal sort of cycle for one. But if again, so there are certain rules and regulations regarding the women who do not menstruate, etc., which he also goes through. But the main issue is that if you must give 3 months, 3 months must be given to them. So what happens? So we briefly discussed the issue of how she must give the talaq in purity. What if he gives the talaq during the period of menstruation? The divorce still does take place. And the reason why I mention this is that some people think that, you know, if I give the divorce in the haid, it doesn't count. It does actually, it does take effect. Because the reason that the prohibition of doing so is obviously the above point which we have discussed, but the validity of the divorce is not negated because of that. It is, however, what is recommended in this point is that he takes her back, retraction, due to the words of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam when he says to Umar that order your son to take back his wife when he gave her talaq in her iddah, in her period, in her haid. So this statement actually conveys the validity of the divorce in such a case, but then tells us to retract that divorce. So therefore, this is why some of the fuqaha, they mention this. This is really the recommendation in this point of talaq during her menstruation. But the correct view is that it is obligatory, acting upon the true intent of the command. Further, it is obligatory for undoing the offense to the extent possible by removing its legal effect. And that is the iddah. So the injury caused by the prolongation of the iddah, it is not something which is recommended. And then he goes on. This is, I mentioned this earlier, that the difference between a woman who he has had relationship and who he hasn't, if he says to his wife who he has had a relationship and she has got her menstruation, you are divorced thrice according to the sunnah. What does this mean? Someone might say this, that you are divorced thrice according to the sunnah, when he had there was no intention in this statement. So, but what's happened is that she is divorced with one repudiation taking effect in each period of the month of the purity. So he's saying that you are divorced thrice according to the sunnah. This means that he's divorcing her 3 times, one in each month. The reason for this is that this sunnah conveys time, and the time of the sunnah form is a period of purity in which no relationship takes place. If he had formed the intention that all 3 should take effect that very moment, or one utterance repudiation at the beginning of each month, then they will take effect as he intended. As he intended. This is the opinion of Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Yusuf and Muhammad. But Imam Zufar, he says that the intention of all repudiation operating at once is not valid, as it amounts to a bid'ah innovation, which opposes the sunnah way of giving talaq. So very, very important now, the issue of niyyah, the intention, that his intention includes as a probable meaning to the validity of the occurrence of the divorce. So according to this statement of his, it does not include the form confirming to the sunnah, and it is his intention that will be very, very important point here. When the judge asks a husband, makes him take a qasam, a halaf, an oath by the Quran, that what was your intention behind this? And this is a serious matter. When somebody is asked to do such an action, was your intention 1, 2, or 3? He is obliged by the Sharia to cooperate in these instances. And again, this is what the point here we're trying to put across, is that you could fool the Imam, you could fool the Mufti, you could fool the Qadi. Ultimately, what is in your heart, Allah knows what's in your heart, and that is what you will be judged upon. You can cover whatever you want in this world, but ultimately you must be accountable to yourself. Yes, sister, you can unmute yourself. Bismillah. We're nearly finished anyway. We're going to finish it.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam, sister. You okay?
Yeah, subhanallah, funny enough, I was doing the tafsir of Surah At-Taghabun.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was about this talaq and everything. and we were studying it. You know, when according to, like you're saying, that you know, when they give talaq, saying it 3 times. I was looking on Google today, and because I was researching about different talaqs, and then stuff came up like you know, that in some countries they've made it illegal. They've actually passed the laws. I think it's in Malaysia. I don't know where they passed the law that they class the 3-time divorce as it won't take
India.
effect and it's illegal.
India,
What's your view on that? I don't understand. I'm a bit confused.
Yeah, sister. I think they've made it a law in India. From what I've heard.
Is it India?
India, they've made some laws in India. I think also in some Arab countries as well. I think some Far East countries. It is a talaq bid'ah. I mean, that's without doubt. I mean, it's not the right way of doing things. I mean, we obviously we discourage and we warn against this. You know, to all our husbands, you know, to the husbands and the wives. The reason it was very prevalent at the time of obviously the Prophet ﷺ in the Arab society, where they would give, not, you know, why it was, you know, it was restricted to 3, because they used to give 7, 10, 20 talaqs to the women, and there was no sort of control of what they were doing. So the talaq is something which is very, very delicate, and you know, subhanallah, we try to, you know, sit down with those brothers and sisters, you know, who are thinking about going down this path, you know, with very, very, you know, much you know, guidance for, you know, to the sensitivity of the matter. Many ayahs, as you know, Sister Nadi, you know, they talk about talaq in its form of how many times, you know, a man, you know, can say the words, and what does he do if he wants to take her back. If he does not take her back, what happens? And then it will come up in the next few chapters regarding what happens if he does go down the route of 3 talaqs. There is a slight difference of opinion on this. It is not the majority opinion, and it again, it is another topic which we will discuss hopefully in a few weeks' time. The Hanafis have their view, the Shafis have their view, but it's something which is very, very, very delicate.
But I just want to say, because we were discussing this in the class this morning, and we came to the conclusion that, you know, I think the problem is that you know, when before people get married, you know, especially the Muslims, we don't know nothing about divorce. We don't know the husband and wife rights, nothing at all. So we just get married and we don't know if you said this happens, if this happens. So I think it's before someone gets married, there should be a requirement from the, you know, the imam. There should be a requirement, right? You're gonna do your nikah, you're gonna get married, but before you do this, you have to do this course for a week. Where you know where you go through you know, this is what happens if you divorce, this is the process. Then only then nikah should be done.
You know, that's how it used to happen, Mrs. Nad. You know, before they used to do the nikah in the mosques. So mosques, they used to call, even now in some Arab countries, they will call the husband and wife, you know, with the wali, sit them down, you know, explain to them the nikah, the pre-nikah, you know, the rights of the man, rights of the woman, what is divorce. And obviously they would warn them against these things about the talaq, 3 talaqs, the 2 talaqs. They would obviously warn them, but that hardly happens anymore. I mean, even in the nikah.
Don't you think it should, though? Don't you think we should start doing that?
Yeah, so there is a new initiative which is called a pre-marital sort of advice service, or pre-nikah sort of advice service. I mean, that is something which needs to happen. I agree with you. Definitely, it is something beneficial for the couple. More than that, you know, if we have regular courses, you know, for the brothers, for the sisters, marriage courses, that will obviously help as well. And ultimately, it boils down to you know, serious counseling and serious advice given.
Yeah, but like I said, I think that no one should be the nikah process. Nikah should not be done until the husband and wife have gone through gone through it all. Because what happens is, you know, when we, you know, especially here in this in England, when you get married and you don't know anything about the laws, you get married. Some people just say this 3 times, but they don't really know.
Yeah, it's disastrous. I mean, if they have children and if they have, if they're young couples, it's really.
And if they knew, maybe it'll be in the back of their head. They'll think twice before uttering it, and they don't know. So that's my advice. I think the mosque should make it compulsory before they get married.
Yeah, definitely. Inshallah, it's a good suggestion, and really, I'm with you on that, Sister Nadia. We should have some process, for the couples to have some awareness of what they're actually going into themselves. And again, if the parents are on board as well, it'd be helpful. Definitely, inshallah, something we need to look at. Bismillah wa ta'ala. May Allah make it easy for all of us. So I'm just going to finish off with this final bit because I had a meeting which has already started, but I will join, inshallah. Um, where are we? So if he had formed the niyyah, so again going back to the intention, if he intended three at once, then it happens, and that's how simple it is. And Zufar, he says no. He says that this is contrary to what we say. He said that if you are said that I'm giving you three talaqs according to the Sunnah, this means that it is thrice, but it is in one in each month. So again, the intention plays an important part in the talaq. So whenever he attends, if he intends all three utterance in one go, then the generality with respect to timing stands nullified. So then what happens is the intention of three is not valid. As a final point before I conclude is that we need to be very, very careful. It's not a laughing matter. It's not a joke. And the three things which you should be very, very careful. One of them is the talaq and nikah. It's not to take it lightly, rather to look at it with seriousness and to make sure we understand what are the after effects of what we do during our marriage, pre-marriage, and also post-marriage, and also during the marriage, where we have to make sure that we do things according to the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I think that should be inshallah fine for today. I apologize for the length of today's session. It was just an introduction to what's going to come inshallah in the next few weeks. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to benefit us from what has been said, and to allow us to help each other, to help one another, to come back to the sunnah, to come back to the straight path, and to come away from ignorance and jahala in this world and the hereafter. ربنا